I want to ask you something before we get started. If someone was to hand you a list of every job I've ever had, Fidelity Investments, national accounts, even maybe the time in banking, uh, business intelligence, which one would you say was my favorite job? What would you pick? I'm going to tell you right now, you'd be wrong. My favorite job, the one that changed how I see people, the one that changed how I felt about even ministry, how I see purpose, and even how I see myself, was training school bus drivers and being a school bus driver for Kenton County Schools. I know. Just stay with me. You're probably thinking, that seems odd. I would never do that. And, the thing that I can say about that role is that God showed me relations, like real relations with people. He showed me patience, and he showed me what it actually meant to invest in someone. And not just the kids I transported every day, but their entire family. I've carried that into every single thing that I've done since then. I've even combined it with skills that I did learn at some of those prior jobs that I had. And today, this is that story. So, how did I become a school bus driver? Let's start there, because there's actually two parts to my time as being a school bus driver. And being a school bus driver was only about 6-ish, little plus or minus years of my total time with the Kenton County School District. So it wasn't, I was with the Kenton County School District for around 15-ish years. And I say that because I was credited for 15 years, but I actually kind of started working for the school district off and on a little bit earlier than that. But anyways, how did I become a bus driver? Well, you might have remember in, I think it was my second video, that I talked briefly about being an elementary school secretary. And don't get me wrong, love that job too. Got to experience some things that in a different way than being in the classroom. So that was an interesting job. But there was this lady, and I hope that she doesn't mind that I'm mentioning her name. It was Miss Patty. And how would I describe Miss Patty? I would describe her as someone that cared about the kids on her bus. She had high expectations for them. And she wasn't afraid to challenge the kids, and she wasn't afraid to challenge administration when there would be unresolved behaviors. But as I got to know Miss Patty, over time, one day she walked in, and I don't even remember what I was doing. I was probably being the school nurse for a moment, um, taking care of one of the kids or something. And after that was over, she was standing there and she was like, "Do you like what you're doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And she was like, "You know what you should do?" Because that's Miss Patty. She's not afraid. She'll just blurt out. She'll just tell you. Um, she said, "You need to be a bus driver because you'll make a lot more money than what you're doing here right now. And I think that you would be a good bus driver." And I was like, hmm. And I didn't really immediately like take her up on the offer. I didn't really ask her any questions. I just kind of absorbed that. And I did have my CDL for our church bus. We had a church bus that was just a 15 passenger, or no, 25 passenger bus. So I did have my CDL at the time. But of course, driving a school bus, that's a whole different level of a CDL. So she was like, she goes, I think you should consider it. And she just kind of just left it there. I think she might have come in one or two more times in the rest of my time being a school secretary, and she might have teased me about it. You know, have you thought about starting that bus driving career yet? And of course, I was like, no, I think I'm exactly where I need to be. So different things happened. I actually went away from the school system for a very brief time and then eventually came back. But when I came back, even though I was in the classroom, there was an opportunity came up again to be a bus driver. And I was like, maybe I really should consider this. Our classroom, the classroom I was in at that time, actually had a need for having a bus driver that was available for like trips during the school day. And there was some difficulty in getting that scheduled. So I went back and talked to Miss Patty some more, asked her some more questions, and she got me started on the path to get into the bus driving field. There's a lot of classroom training that had to take place, plus I had to take another CDL test because I was driving a larger vehicle, and had to be observed, of course, to make sure that I could pass all of the things. And learning how to drive a bus, it was interesting. And when I first got in the bus, I was like, okay, I think I can do this. Man, this is much bigger. It turns different. It handles different than our 25 passenger bus. So I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But I continued on with the training, and the weird thing is there was a couple of things that I had to repeat and do over and over and over because it just I wasn't doing it as well as I needed to. And she, as my bus driver trainer, she actually ended up training me to drive a bus. She did put me in some difficult situations just to see, how I handled it. And the thing I started realizing is that driving a bus was pretty natural, like weirdly natural. And I didn't understand it. But the cool thing, as I kind of thought about it and did a little bit of investigation, my grandpa had always drove a dump truck, so that was a larger vehicle. He had to have a CDL to do that. He did that for over 20 something years plus. Um, so it was kind of, that was in his blood. That was his thing to do. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I inherited some of this bus driving stuff or driving large vehicles, because that's what my grandpa did. I also learned that I want to say my great grandpa's, I think it would have been a brother, that he actually, way back in I want to say like in the 40s or 50s, somewhere in there, he drove for Kenton County Schools. He actually drove a school bus. And so I'm like, wow. So I have this skill on my grandpa's side, but I also have this skill kind of feeding through from my grandma's side of the family. So I guess there was a little bit of the skill. I guess I had it genetically. If you believe in that or not, I think that you do inherit some things just by your genetics, both good and bad. So I had to start out, I had to be a sub, so that caused me to have to drive different routes, work with different kids pretty much on a daily basis. And I drove all the different size school buses. I drove the special needs buses, the buses that could actually transport kids in wheelchairs. So that was an experience. But then I eventually was able to apply for a regular route. And God was in that too, because the roads that I traveled, even though that route was a shorter route, a more condensed route, because it was in it was a few subdivisions and just like some outlying homes that were along the route. And those homes were outside the subdivision. I had a natural way, and I know it was from being involved in ministry and working with students already at my church, but I actually started forming relationships with these kids and their families, and there's so many stories. There's kids that had their first day of school that were very anxious about riding the bus, and when I found out about it, the families come through on at school and get like their materials list, and they find out about what bus they ride and about what time the bus would come. They get all that information. So those parents would say, "Hey, my kid, he or she is really anxious about riding the bus and doesn't want to ride the bus, and I just don't know how it's going to go. Is there any way I can get your number? Maybe we can, do something to get them used to the bus." And I think it's been a bit, but I think that there were like a couple of kids that I actually, like, before school started, I drove by their house and stopped, found out when they would be home, called the parent and said, "Hey, I'm going to be driving the route today, just as a test run. I can give you a call when I get to your street, and I'll stop by your house if you are home, and we can kind of do a little quick bus visit." Sometimes we were able to get the kids acclimated to the bus on that parent night at school, like before school started. We would have a few buses there so they could get on the bus, see what a bus looked like, and kind of know what to expect and learn about all the sounds of a bus. So those are really cool experiences, and you're gonna have to bear with me. Um, Being able to make a family feel comfortable and them having the assurance that the person transporting their child every day cared about not just all the kids on the bus, but also cared about their child specifically. And if riding the bus was stressful, that person was going to try to make sure that their child was able to ride that bus without much issue, or without problems. Um, so most people would probably say, there's no way I'd drive a school bus. But I know that driving a bus is not for everybody. It is stressful. Um, you have a very precious cargo that you're hauling every day. And the more stuff even I see on the road to this day, I pray for bus drivers, because some of the driver behaviors that I see around school buses is absurd. So those drivers, they have a tough job, and if they're going in and doing that every day, and your child thinks a lot of their bus driver, that's a big deal. That actually means a lot. So, I absolutely miss driving a bus, but because of my diagnosis with MS back in 2016, I had to step away from driving the bus. And I did that before my health got horrible or got really bad. I just knew that stress was not good for my body, and then it probably was not good for me to continue driving the bus, not just for my health, but also for the safety of the kids that I was transporting every day. So when I get to talking about this job, it's a hard one. The second part of that job, I actually ended up going to state training and became certified to train people to drive school buses. And that was rewarding because I knew that the people that I trained, I had high expectations from them, and I always put the kids first. So whenever I was training someone to drive, I constantly talked about children's behavior, how to handle different situations on the bus, how to make the bus ride fun for the kids, but also safe. How having a clear set of rules was actually your best friend and would make the bus ride even easier. That every bus is different, and although schools and the school system can create a standard set of rules, your bus is unique, so you might need to tweak those rules a little bit so that your kids, when they get on the bus, they can understand what your expectation is. Yes, this is a school's expectation, but on our bus, we're also going to do these things. So when you are following these rules, then you are showing kindness, so you might talk about the set of rules where it talks about how you treat other people on the bus. So I tried to communicate the importance of the bus driver's attitude and how you handled each child that got on that bus, and realizing that each kid on that bus is different. Um, it's not a cookie cutter. They're not robots that get on the bus. Each one has a different need, a different concern. So I when I was training people to drive a bus, I felt like I critiqued them in a good way, even when, because part of the training was that you would sit on the bus and kind of not say anything, and you would observe them as they were driving your route, and then you would give them feedback and tell them. I would always tell them what they did well, what they could work on. And there were some people that were a natural at it. I really had a hard time giving them critical feedback because I'm like, they chose the right thing. Like, this is going to be cake for them. They're going to be great drivers. And, a few of those people do still drive a bus to this day. So they did pick the right thing. I don't know if, as a bus driver or even a bus driver trainer, if I could have made it through COVID. That all happened after I left the school system, and just some of the things that bus drivers had to deal with when they were transporting students during that time. Oh, it was crazy. And of course, seen a lot of stuff online. I can't speak for other people in other school districts unless I knew them personally. But I know that some of the stories I heard from our local bus drivers, it was definitely a weird time, and my stress probably would have went through the roof because of just some of the things that they had to do when they were transporting the kids, and not really knowing an answer, like what the end result was going to be. So I walked in not really sure about the being a bus driver. I learned that it was kind of my thing. If I could be a bus driver today, I would love to. Like I said, I don't know that I could have made it through COVID. So if I was still able to drive a bus, I often wonder, would I have made it through all the COVID stuff, because that was just crazy. But when I walked away from bus driving, I walked away with enhancing my ability to train people, because our training program did allow us to kind of add to the training. Like, as long as we covered the basics, we could change the way it was presented, try to make it more interactive, things like that. So I think I developed more skills as a trainer, and I became a better leader by not just driving a bus, but also training people to drive a bus. So that role, it really taught me that leaders, they don't just perform. Good leaders, that they don't just perform, but they multiply. So I hope that I made other people a better bus driver for the time that I was there. I did get to provide overall training for the entire district. So, I was able to touch a piece of every person that drove for that school system when we would do the beginning of the year trainings. So, it was good to be trusted to be able to provide that type of leadership to the people that I worked with. And I don't care what anybody says, there might have been a few drivers that were a little rough around the edges, but I felt like that pretty much every driver that we had, that they were that they were good drivers, and they tried to do the right thing. And of course, nobody's perfect. We're all going to mess up. But just to be able to make other people better, that is actually a good feeling, and being appreciated for it too. That was always a plus, and getting the appreciation from the person that you were training, felt better. Like I enjoyed that feedback more than any feedback that I would have gotten from people in upper management. I had a supervisor that was pretty supportive, but it was the drivers, it was my coworkers that made it a great place. So, as far as my faith, I felt like that God put me in that seat, and He was preparing me for something more, something that I couldn't see yet. It did help me, the skills I gained with that job, it did help me with my prior position, but it also helped me do even better in ministry, because there were a lot of things I learned by driving that bus every day that I learned from those kids that I took away, even when I went back to church and did ministry. So here's what I want everyone to kind of take away from this. Your favorite chapter, it might not be the most impressive thing that you've ever done. I don't know, except for my bus driver friends, I don't know that anyone would think that driving a bus is an impressive job, or a job that someone would yearn for, that they would really want, and they'd be like, that's what I'm going to do next. But, and not even, that it was, that working for that school district was a recognizable position. It wasn't. But it is a position where I found out what I was really made of. Like, what is it that I really wanted to do? And I think that that's what makes it so hard to talk about. Honestly, what was planted in me doing that job, I know I'll never lose it. It'll never go away. It just deepened my calling into ministry, which was something I never thought that I would be able to return to and be effective. But even God has changed that story and put me in an unexpected role. So that's what I'm going to talk about in my next episode. You don't want to miss it. So if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you liked what you heard today, go ahead and hit the like button. And have you ever had a job that maybe it wasn't a big deal to anyone else, but it was a big deal to you? Go ahead and put it in the comments. I'd love to hear about jobs that other people had that maybe is not something that people would think was an important job, but actually it is. So go ahead and put that in there. And I am Dwayne. I'm unashamed from A to Z, and I will see you next time.